This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today. I'm your host, Jay Scott, and I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field experiencing God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have a father-son combo that's two fantastic elk callers. We actually have a couple of Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation world champion callers. We've got Bryan and Brayden Langely from McMinnville, Oregon.
Yep.
And Bryan is a 2009 men's Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation champion. He won as in the pro division 2012, 2013. He won the pro division. He got second place in 2014. He's a five-time Oregon state champion elk caller. And his son, Braden, won the Pee Wee division. He's won in 2009. He was a world champion. 2010, he got second in the youth. 11 and 13, he won second in the youth, and in 2014, he won the world in the youth division. He also called in 2012 in the Oregon State Championships, and I believe finished second. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Two phenomenal elk callers. Bryan is a point-blank game calls pro staffer. I've heard these guys call in person. I've known them for years. When I judged the contest, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation contest in 2011, 12, and 13, they were both competing, both elk fanatics, and it's great to have father-son, Bryan and Brayden. How you guys doing?
We're doing really good. Thanks, Jay, for having us on your show today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk elk. We're going into turkey season here, but in Arizona, our draws will be coming out for elk here in another probably 3 weeks. And, it's about the end of March. Everybody starts getting excited for elk around here. And I'm honestly starting to grow tail feathers and strut around the house. And I've already, overrun my welcome with my wife with all my turkey calls. So, it's nice to talk to you guys a little bit about elk. I want to dive straight into elk calling with you guys. And Bryan, first, why don't you give me a little rundown on you and Brayden and what you guys like to do, and tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay, so we've grown up in the McMinnville area, lived here all of our lives, and grew up in a hunting family. I mean, Dad really started that tradition early on. Pretty much hunted all of my life, mainly hunted with a rifle for black-tailed deer up until about 1990. And then a guy from my dad's work introduced my dad to archery hunting, and him and I picked it up at that time, both together. And, with archery hunting elk, I mean, it's a challenging sport, and learning to call just gives you that extra advantage in trying to hunt those animals. And so that was really kind of the start of the calling for me. And Brayden, I think, from the time before he could actually walk in his car seat, he's been out there on hunting trips with me. And so, it was just a natural for him just to, join along with us. And I think, Brayden was 9 when he actually, called in his first bull, a Roosevelt bull that I actually harvested. So it's in the blood.
That's fantastic. And, Brayden is 16 years old. Bryan, do you have any other children? And, you're married as well, I know.
Yep. Been married this year will be 26 years to my wonderful wife, Rhonda. And we have 6 children. We have 3 boys and 3 girls. And Braden is currently the only one who hunts with me. The 2 oldest girls, they thought they might like to hunt, and they tried it out, but they didn't realize that hunting means you actually go out and actually hunt. You don't always find something. So.
Absolutely, and probably getting up at 3 in the morning multiple days in a row and weeks in a row is probably, it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah, no hair dryers either, so.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Well, guys, when you do go archery elk hunting, do you primarily hunt Roosevelt elk or Rocky Mountain elk?
You know, over the years, we've primarily hunted Roosevelt elk. I love to go to Eastern Oregon. I love the openness over there of the terrain compared to hunting the brush bulls over here on the coast. It's way more challenging hunting Roosevelt elk just with all the brush. So, but we've mainly hunted Roosevelt elk for the most part. But I go east whenever I can.
Got you. And how does it work in the state of Oregon as far as your elk tag? Is it just one elk? And it's you can shoot a Roosevelt or a Rocky Mountain. How does that work, guys?
It's there's a general archery season tag that's good for either pretty much anywhere in the state except for those units that are draw units. There's a few units in the state that you actually have to draw for, but other than that, it's just an over-the-counter general archery season tag.
Great. And Braden, have you been able to harvest elk yet with your bow?
Yeah, in I think it was 2011, I shot my first elk with a rifle, and I got shot an elk with a rifle in 2013, and in 2014 I shot my first bull with a bow.
Awesome. Did you call the bull in? Tell me a little bit about your first bull elk with a bow.
Well, actually, my dad called in my bull. We had been. Do we go into the full detail about it, or?
Yeah. Tell me about the hunt. Tell me about your dad calling it in, or tell me about the hunt.
Okay, so we were going to try out a new area, kind of out of the blue. Just a friend had recommended it, and so we parked at the gate in the morning and hiked out this trail, and we spooked some elk that were just like down from the trail a little ways, and they took off running, and so we stopped for a little bit and called and waited and called some more to see if we could get a response. And then a little bit later, after we had walked some more, we heard a bull bugle not too far from the trail, and so we marked the spot on our GPS and went after the bull to see if we could get him to come in. And it was kind of a cat and mouse chase for quite a while, and then so finally we just decided to sit down and do some calling for a little while to see if we could get something to come in, and we heard another bull bugle, and it came in to my dad actually, and my dad didn't have a shot, and so he was holding his bow at full draw, and he didn't have a shot, and a cow saw him, which he didn't see when he let down his bow, and they took off running, and then he started bugling, got back a little ways, and set me up. And the bull came in.
Same bull?
The same bull came in again. And I drew my bow, and I think I cow called at the wrong time or something, and it stopped right when there was a tree by its vitals. And
I've done that.
So I was waiting, and
are you at full draw?
Yeah, I was at full draw.
Bull's like at 10 yards.
Yeah.
And he's got you pegged, or he's just stopped?
He's looking right at me because he.
Okay.
And so Did he take off running? Yeah.
He just turned to leave. Yeah.
He turned to leave. I think he did run a little bit first.
Yeah, maybe.
I think he ran a little bit first, and I cow called, and he stopped at around, I just guessed around 30 yards, and there was another tree right by its vitals. And then
it's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and then as he started to walk away, I shot, and he was quartering away, and I hit him a little bit back, but it ended up going right in the heart on the other side. So, and he didn't go too far.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. That's a great story. I think that's a good lesson for people listening. You know, a lot of times when you're calling up a bull, and you guys can jump in here, you know, when you're calling them up and they get in pretty close, they have a way of finding out when you're drawing your bow, and it always seems like they stop when everything is in plain view except for their vitals.
Yeah.
But a good tip there is, you know, even if they're going to spook, it's okay, because usually they take 4, 5, 6, 7 steps, and you can cow call or give a spike-type bugle, and they will stop and turn around. Most all the time you can stop them. Would you guys concur with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. You know, that's why it's, you know, so nice to be able to learn to use a diaphragm call, just because you have that ability just to be able to draw your bow and then call at the same time to get those elk to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the beauty of a diaphragm, and it's also the beauty of having two guys calling. And you know, if you're stuck and pinned down, you know, your dad's behind you, can probably be making some cow sounds and what have you, and maybe get a chance to draw that bull's attention away from you. So that was last season, I take it, in September, Braden. So you're obviously looking forward to this season.
Yeah, I am.
That's fantastic. What kind of bow are you shooting?
I'm shooting a Bowtech Experience right now.
Nice. And your dad, what does he shoot?
A Bowtech RPM 360.
Yeah. Yep.
So it sounds like Bowtech runs in the family.
Yeah, it does. We've shot Bowtech for years.
That's great. That's great. And so your first bull was on the ground, and did you guys have a long pack out? Was it just you and your dad? And how did you get the elk out?
Yeah, it was. It was a little hard to pack out.
Was it in a bad spot?
You know, it really wasn't that bad of a spot, but it was about 2 miles from the truck. Just a little over 2 miles, but there was just tons of blowdowns in there, and so you had lots of high stepping, and so we didn't have our meat packs with us. We just had our day packs, and so but we had carry all of our game bags and knives and stuff in our day pack, so we can, you know, process the elk there on the ground. And so we quartered up the elk, and then Braden packed the head out on the first trip, and then we got our meat packs and then started back in.
When you shot the elk, when you got it done, and when you got back to the truck with the first load, give me a time frame here. What are we dealing with?
I shot the elk, it was 11, I think. Wasn't it?
Okay.
When we found it.
Yeah, right around 11.
So you're midday dealing with the elk and probably getting back to the truck at 3, 4 o'clock.
Yeah. And then, you know, when we were hiking back in, we actually ran into some guys that were coming out. In hindsight, you know, sometimes the guys were really nice, and we showed them some pictures of our bull. And we had actually heard them bugling earlier in the day, and they asked us if we needed some help packing the elk out. And, you know, we didn't want to mess up their hunt or anything.
Hey, let me give you guys some advice. The answer to that is always yes.
So we said, no, we don't need any help. We can handle it. And so we got back to the elk and got our first pack loaded up, and it started raining. And and we didn't have any rain gear with us, and it just started coming down. It got dark, and thunder and lightning, and, you know, it was a good thing that we had marked our trail with our GPS on the way in, so we knew exactly where the elk was at. Because if we didn't have that GPS, you know, we wouldn't have been able to get in and out of there in the dark like that. And so it was probably close to midnight, 11 o'clock, I think, that night by the time we got everything back to camp. So it was a long, hard pack out.
Yeah, you guys will never forget that one. That's fantastic. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about what elk meat means to your family, and do you eat a lot of game meat?
We do eat a lot of game meat, and I always think back because I think it's funny because I think God has a sense of humor because when my wife and I got married, she was a vegetarian. Vegetarian and a hunter. So, but, after a few years of eating these, nice organic thick steaks, she finally came around. So she's full into it now. So we eat a lot of elk, a lot of blacktail deer. Braden's harvested one turkey, had a couple shots last year, but that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. And you guys have turkey season. Are you going to be hunting here coming up here? What is it, another month for you guys?
Yeah, the beginning of April, turkey season opens. So
are you as avid with turkey as you are for elk?
Pretty new actually with turkey hunting. We Braden went on a guided turkey hunt with Jody Smith down out of Southern Oregon, or kind of that direction. And then he harvested his first turkey there. So that kind of got us started thinking about turkey hunting a little more. When you have a big family and a full-time job, sometimes you have to pick and choose what you're going to spend all your time on. And elk is really our passion, so that's what we kind of focus on mainly. Sure.
And while we're on that subject, what do you do for a living, Bryan?
So I work out at the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So we're both tribal members of the Grand Ronde tribe, and I manage the higher education program. And then right now I have a double duty as the assistant general manager.
Okay. And Braden, I assume being 16, you're probably about a sophomore or junior?
Yeah, I'm a sophomore.
Okay, and Braden, what do you do other than elk hunting? I think you play an instrument or in a band, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a band with my sisters. We play at local coffee shops and different events.
Awesome. Do you sing or do you play an instrument?
I play the guitar, and my sisters sing, and one of them plays the bass.
Nice. So as a family, you guys go and play at different coffee shops around the area?
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Nice.
I'm learning some programming, and I also am taking some martial art classes. So.
Oh, I saw that on Facebook. What type of martial arts are you interested in?
It's called Shaolin Kempo. It's kind of a mix of the different systems.
Okay, good. How long have you been doing that, Braden?
It'll be about 4 years.
Nice. Good for you.
Yeah, he's actually getting ready to test for his black belt here this summer. So.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Wow, that keeps you in good shape, I assume.
Yeah.
Good for you. I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about competition calling, and I'd like to get both of your perspectives on, how many contests you call in a year, and how do nerves play into the competition calling, and how when you first started, how were the nerves, and have you been able to conquer those, or does it still get real nerve-wracking, and how do you handle that as a caller? Either one of you can start out.
So I'm trying to think the first competition that I called. I think it was like in 2006. There was a Sportsman's Warehouse in Salem that opened up, and that first year they had an elk calling competition. Really had no idea what that was even about or what the process was, and so it was really a huge learning curve and types of calls that you need to do in a competition. But nerves definitely play a huge role in being successful up on the stage. I mean, the first time that I called at a World Elk Calling Championship was when the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation had their annual convention here in Portland, Oregon. And so I went there and called in that competition. I remember it very, very clearly because my legs were shaking. So up there on stage, I was sure, everybody could see that. But
how did you do?
I ended up missing the finals by 1 point.
Oh, good for you in your first big contest.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of stuff, and you know, just listening to some of the other callers, and then just having conversations with some of those callers, and all the callers are really friendly and willing to share how they make specific calls or what kind of calls to do. I know that J.R. Keller, actually, he was one of the first guys that I had a conversation with, and he was very helpful at just giving me some tips. And
he's a fantastic guy.
Yeah.
He's a great caller, but he's just a fantastic guy. So it doesn't surprise me at all that JR was one of the first to reach out to you.
Yeah, and he was actually the guy who kind of ran the elk calling competition for the Sportsman's Warehouse that year, that first year I called. So it was a good learning experience. But even today, I mean, I still get a little nerved up. Still getting up on stage. Sometimes I get more nerved up than others. Like this last year, since I had won it the previous year, you don't have to call in the preliminaries, but I always do just to try to work out some of the nerves. And I was way more nervous in the preliminaries than I was in the finals.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And Braden, what about you? What's your experience been? How old were you in that 2010, I guess, at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, or if you entered state contests? How were your nerves?
I always get nervous every year.
Yeah.
And what were you saying?
How do you handle that?
Taking deep breaths and.
Does it work?
Sort of.
One of the things that kind of helps is to have a specific routine already practiced out, and then you could actually write that routine down, and Braden tapes his routine to his tube, so he can see it, and then he can just go through those, and that really helps to calm the nerves a little bit, because you kind of know exactly what you're going to do when you're up there.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost gives it some structure, and then you in essence block out everything, and you're basically just running through your routine,
right,
by going off your notes that's taped on your bugle.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, I'd like for you to give me a little bit of demonstration, either maybe a run that you would run on the stage, or maybe just give me some cow calling and talk about your style of cow calling, and then, or if you want to start with bugling first, maybe run through some bugles or something. Give me some demonstration here, if you would. Either one of you can start. I don't care.
Okay. So I'll have Braden call here in just a second, but, it seems like the calling continues to evolve over the years when somebody hears a new sound out there. I know Steve Chappell had the estrus scream, and so then everybody's trying to do the estrus scream on the stage, and some of those calls that you end up doing on the stage I don't necessarily always use out in the field, but it's good to have a variety of different calls when you're up on stage. And so we'll try to do all of those cow sounds, calf sounds, so a lost calf, kind of a cow-calf talking together, couple of cows talking together, maybe a cow bugle. We'll do an estrus scream and a cow bark, and then just kind of some cow herd talk. So
yeah, give it to me.
All right, Braden. So there we go.
Awesome. Now, were you both calling there, or was that all just Braden?
That was all just Braden.
Wow.
I know it.
That's fantastic. I thought you both were calling. I'm like, goodness, there's a whole herd there. Braden, what kind of calls are you liking to blow right now? What are you using?
Right now I'm using the Jones medium.
Jones medium.
Yeah, Jones.
And have you always used a diaphragm call in your calling competition, your routine? Do you always use a mouth diaphragm, or have you used bite and blows, or some of the hoochie mamas, or have you always used a diaphragm?
Once in a while I use the like a hyper lip sternal reeded call. With the diaphragm too, but.
And on the stage, when you have nerves, is it a little harder to control those external calls? I know for me as a hunter, when I'm guiding guys, it's maybe not nerves as much, but maybe confidence in the call with it sticking sometimes. Have you had an external call ever stick on you, or has that been fairly successful for you?
I haven't had one actually do that in competition. Definitely, because you're not blowing on it all the time, and so there's not as much saliva that's built up in the call, and so I'll bring a number of those. I use the Mini Mew by Point Blank, but I'll bring a number of those and just play with them ahead of time to see which one that I can blow on without it making any mistakes, because that's one of the differences between calling out in the woods and competition calling is you can get away with some stuff out in the woods, and elk are a little forgiving, but up on the stage it's not so forgiving.
Yeah, you've got judges, and I've judged in the contest, and that's your job. You're sitting there listening for any little slight weakness at all, and it's like even the last place finisher in the contest is probably going to call the heck out of bulls. So I've just got back from the National Wild Turkey Federation Grand Nationals, and I just have to say, even in the preliminaries, they're all fantastic callers, and how the judges, honestly, the top, the guys that make it to the finals, the top 10, as an elk judge, I can hear a lot of the stuff with the elk, but I have no idea how these turkey judges judge, because they just seem all phenomenal to me. Braden, there was a particular call there in your routine that was a real kind of a nasally, even a calf type of real, yeah. I really liked that call. Give me that call, and I want to see if that's the one that I liked. It to me it sounded like a kind of a high pitched, kind of nasally calf kind of an excited calf sound.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah, to me, you're just gonna tear the elk up in the woods with that, that short, just real nasally kind of call. Dad, how do you like that call of his?
Oh, I love that call. And, I think competition calling wise, I think that's one of the big things that separates those top spots is the ability to be able to do those real soft cow sounds and those real kind of real clear kind of excited calf sounds. So
absolutely,
because those those take a lot of work, a lot of practice to be able to get those real soft cow sounds. And I know I've watched a lot of your videos on YouTube and a lot of the demonstrations that you've done and watched you call in a lot of bulls down there, and I'm always impressed at your ability to be able to do those real soft cow sounds. And so, my calling out in the woods has kind of evolved over the years, and it seems like in the last probably 5 years, I do a lot more of those real kind of soft cow sounds than I used to do. I used to do a lot more aggressive kind of cow sounds, where now I'll do a lot softer cow sounds and call a lot less than I used to too.
Yeah, I tell people, a lot of times, speaking in mainly Arizona, if I can sneak into, 60, 70 yards from a group of elk that don't know I'm there, and if I can get that close, usually with my soft nasally stuff that I can do, you can get those elk at least to close half the distance. I think one of the challenges, and you guys can chime in, I think one of the challenges in trying to explain to people that if there's elk bugling and you know you're moving in towards them, if you are calling periodically as you're coming in, they are looking in your direction, and two, they are getting used to you coming, and they just sense you coming, and they're going to pick you off. But if you can use your woodsmanship to get in tight and then use that soft, you know, nasally, just herd talk, you know, a lot of those sounds you can't even hear unless you're, you know, 50, 60 yards from those elk.
Yeah, right.
I've found that my success in calling bulls in, and cows for that matter, goes way up when you use those real soft, just inner dynamic herd talk, you know, where you're just, you know, most people will get in 50 yards and blow their same cadence, you know, yeah, and just blow them out. Just like if I were to walk up to you at, you know, 10 feet and just use my booming voice, it would scare you. But if I said, "Hey man, what's going on?" that would be normal. So
definitely.
Bryan, why don't you give me a little of your cow calling, and let me hear some of it. Very good. Real wide variety. And tell me, on some of those calls, you could tell that you were manipulating a little bit with your lips, you know, by closing and opening. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're getting those different tones a little bit by opening and closing your mouth, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, just by making different shapes with your mouth, you can get different sounds out of the diaphragm call, or calling out of the side of your mouth, or, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do with the diaphragm call. So.
Yeah, and those are point-blank calls that you're using there, Bryan?
Right, they are.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's all great stuff. And let's jump into the bugling a little bit. Either one of you can go. Do you use primarily a tube? Why don't you tell me a little bit about the setup that you use for the competition and the setup you use for out in the woods, and if they're the same, maybe compare and contrast those.
Okay. So with competition calling, I'll usually just use two different tubes. One is just, you know, a tube about a big around as the diameter of an elk's esophagus, and it's probably 18 inches long or so. I like to use that tube just to kind of start off with, to do kind of just a bowl, kind of an older bowl sound, and then a smaller bowl sound. And then we have our wiffle ball bat that we've cut off and modified to make an elk bugle out of.
And are you putting any kind of tube tamers, or are you putting any, you know, muffling it in any way? What are you tricking it out with?
Yeah, we have a pretty thick fleece cover over the top of it, and then a couple of tube tamers just to kind of deaden the sound just a little bit so it doesn't sound so tubey. But, you know, these wiffle ball bats can produce a great sound. Too big for my liking to carry out in the woods. I don't feel that I need it. Elk, you know, hear so well anyways. I mean, I usually just carry the point blank grunt tube. It's got kind of a bell end on it, and it's about probably, 18 to 20 inches long or something. I usually pack that one with me most of the time. And then, you know, once in a while, what I'll do when I'm out in the woods is I'll carry it's just the end of a buck grunt. And so it's just that little plastic tube on the end that's probably only about 5 inches long, just to sound like a small bowl, and I'll carry that with me. And you can just collapse it and stick it in your pocket, and you can actually get a pretty good little sound out of it.
Nice. Why don't you walk me through some bugling, maybe start out with some small bowl stuff and then work your way up to, I know you have a wide variety of bugles. Maybe work me through, or maybe do a couple and tell me what you're going to do next, kind of walk me through it.
So I'll do just kind of a small bowl, just kind of that pretty short, kind of high-pitched sound with some real pretty fast grunts on the end. And
that's awesome.
You know, and when I'm competition calling too, I like to do a variety of different calls. So I'll do some small bowls, some bigger bowls, some lip balls, try to do some breathing and those kind of herd sounds. And so kind of a older, kind of a bowl, kind of a moan, bugle kind of a thing that I do at the beginning kind of sounds like this. You know, and not a lot of people in the competition calling do that kind of a sound. They're doing a lot of the bigger bowl sounds, and so it seems like, you know, that's helped me in the competitions just to be able to do a variety of different sounds. So I usually use that smaller tube to do those sounds, and then switch and then pick up the wiffle ball bat and do like a pretty aggressive kind of a lip ball. And when you're doing a lip ball, you're just doing a bugle and you're kind of sputtering your lips to be able to get that real kind of raspy kind of bugle.
Really good. Yeah, that's really good. Now, are you moving when you're on stage? Are you going to do that and move at the same time, or are you going to be stationary with that bugle?
You know, I usually face the curtain when I'm up on the stage calling, because that's where the judges are located at, and I'll move my tube either from left to right or right to left to kind of just move that sound across the stage. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, then we'll go into some kind of like a bowl with some cows, some moaning and some a little bit of breathing and those kind of sounds like this. I don't know if you can hear it on the mic, but we'll try it. Just, you know, trying to get some of those real kind of natural kind of sounds that bulls make, and not that we can really imitate bulls exactly. You know, when we had the Champion of Champions competition down there where we had to listen to real bulls and try to imitate their exact sounds, that was pretty crazy. That was a lot of fun, though.
Absolutely.
So you want Braden to do some calls?
Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay. Braden, why don't you do a few bull sounds? Go.
That's fantastic. Braden, which diaphragm are you using to bugle, and is it the same one you're using to cow call?
It's the same like type of call, but it's a different one that I've tuned differently.
Gotcha. And do you guys actually cut your own calls and make your own calls, or do you use all production calls?
Yeah, we just use all production calls right now, but what we do is we'll tune the calls, and so we'll bend them up a little bit just to loosen the latex up to get the sound out of it that we want to get out of it. So we'll bend our cow calls up a little bit more to loosen that latex up a little more. Found it's a little easier to get those, you know, real soft cow sounds with a little bit looser latex. So we've done.
And tell me when you're talking. I'm getting some feedback there. I don't know if our did you take your headset off or something?
No,
Okay. Tell me about when you're bending these calls. So when you're looking at the horseshoe, are you bending it in the direction that your mouth is shaped, or are you taking it and pushing the horseshoe together? Walk me through your pro tuning technique, because I kind of have my own. I'm curious what you're doing.
What we'll do is we'll bend the back end of that horseshoe towards the shape of the roof of our mouth, and then we'll try the call and see if we like the sound that we're getting out of it. If we don't, then we'll take the front end of that horseshoe towards the open end, and I'll bend each side of that kind of downward and forward on both sides of the horseshoe, and then I'll try the call again. And then if I'm still not getting the sound that I want, then I'll pinch that open end of the horseshoe together to loosen up that latex. So we just continue to do that. And, sometimes I have people ask me, how much should I bend the call? Can I bend the call too much? And so I usually just take one of my old calls and I'll bend it completely in half and then straighten it back out and call with it. So I'm like, don't be afraid to bend up your calls a little bit, because, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to adjust the tension in the latex to be able to get the sound out of it that you want. And so you can do that by bending that call up.
Absolutely. And, one thing, I don't know if you guys have ever tried this, but I've noticed that when I have a mouth call and when the heat's on and, I'm trying to be real crisp and real clean with my initial first call and, talking about cow call, I'll take my tongue actually and pull the latex in. It's in my mouth. Yeah. But I'll actually take my tip of my tongue and I'll kind of bend that latex at a downward. I'll just bend it down just a touch. Do you do that, or have you found that as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do that. I push up and down on the latex and pull on it. And, yeah, if I'm not getting the sound out of it that I think that I want or need, then I will definitely do that.
I've found that for whatever reason, for me to just come right out of the gate, if I'm in close and I've got to make just a perfect call, I'll almost every time just kind of I'll just take my tongue and just barely pull that latex down and then just go right, put my air on it, and it seems like it's in perfect tune.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, when you say you're bending the call, if you were to set it on a flat surface, would it actually have bend that you could see in it, or are we talking real minute little bends?
No, you can see the bend in it. And it just depends, I guess, on the bull call. I'm going to want stretch just a little bit tighter, and so I may not bend the back end of that horseshoe as much as I would as a cow call, but I have my call sitting on a flat surface right now, and you can definitely see a bend in it.
Yeah. Another tip that I do, and you guys can chime in if you have other tips. I found 7-8 years ago when I would go through, one of the challenges as you know with elk calls a lot of times is getting calls that are real consistent as far as out of the package. You can get 10 out of a package, and sometimes the consistency isn't as good.
Right.
I got sometimes where if I'd go through 20 different calls that, maybe there'd be 10 of them that just weren't right.
Right.
I would actually, and this may have no scientific, but Steve Chappell and I used to actually put Sprite or Pepsi.
Oh, really?
In a cup, and we would put the calls that didn't sound exactly right, and we'd let them soak. And we didn't have I probably did it more than he did, but I think what it ended up doing is whatever the carbonation or the sugar or something in the carbonated beverage would actually break the latex down a little bit.
I think so.
And sometimes with those multiple latex reeds, in my mind, I want a turkey call. I want the reeds to always be separate and act independently on their own. But on elk calls, I want the reed, whether it's a double reed or a triple reed, and of course a single, I want them to act as one uniform group. Now, other people may have differing opinions, but I found that by putting them in soda and letting them soak, and probably the sugar, it might be the syrup, but when I could get the latex on a triple or a double reed, or sometimes, a diamond cut or whatever, your cuts are, I found that you could actually tune your call by that. Have you ever tried that?
No, I haven't ever tried that.
Have you ever heard of it?
Nope, I haven't ever heard of it either. I mean, I know that, if I've had a reed that I couldn't get the sound like I wanted it to do just by keeping it in your mouth for an extended period of time, that saliva on the call would tend to loosen that latex up a little bit too.
Yeah, and what's your thinking on my theory of wanting your latex to all be one? I don't mind a triple and with different cuts, but I want that. I found it's most consistent when those latex are meshed together or melt. I don't know what the word is, but they all act as one. What's your thoughts on that, Bryan?
I hadn't even really thought about that too much, and I know that sometimes, I know people who are very specific about their call, and the short latex needs to go up, or some people the short latex needs to go down. And, I've tried the calls both directions, and I haven't found where it makes a lot of difference. And I always put my short latex up.
No kidding.
No, what do you end up doing?
I'm always the short latex for me is always on the bottom.
Oh, really? Interesting. That's
interesting. I'm gonna have to try that. So, are most of the calls that you're blowing, Bryan, are they a single or a double latex?
For competition calling, a double latex. For out in the field, I mean, I carry all of them. Single.
And is the double latex, does it have any cuts in it, or is it just two pieces of latex staggered, one's a little longer than the other?
Yep, just staggered. No cut.
And I know, like Joel Turner, and I think Corey even, Jacobson, and actually some of the other guys, I know from time to time in a lot of their calls, they'll nick either side of it. Do you nick any of your calls?
Nope, I don't. When the Point Blank has the championship series calls, which Joel helped to design those calls, and he has one call that actually has two nicks in it. So,
is the nick on the same side, or are they nicked? Are they opposite side nicks?
Opposite sides, interestingly enough.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me. I know. I mean, I'm probably not the way I used to be as much, but I used to, I'd get calls usually by the 50 or 100. I mean, I would just get a whole pile of them. And I would always have ones that just, for whatever reason, never worked. And with those, I would always play around with surgical scissors and put nicks in them. And sometimes I could bring a call that just couldn't blow. I could bring it back to life, and actually with a nick or two on the side, you can make them work.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've noticed recently is that, like the old Jones calls, they used to just have a double tab, kind of bend over on the frame in the back, and they were a lot thinner. Frame, a lot easier to bend. A lot of the newer calls are a lot thicker frames and a lot more difficult to try to bend those calls up.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if it's got to be in the frame that's making them a little more rigid.
Yeah.
In your bugling, you're definitely using a multi-reed call.
Yeah, I am.
Have you always used multi-reed call, or have you ever gone with just singles?
I mean, I've used just singles before, but I'll mix it up too, because sometimes, when you're out in the field, sometimes you don't know what is going to make a bull fire off. And so sometimes I'll use a single or a double or a triple. Sometimes I've been working a bull and, not had him come in, and then just switch from a double to a triple diaphragm, and just that little bit of change in the tone of the call, kind of set the bull off. So I carry them all with me.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a question. So you're in Oregon. Let's say you're hunting rosies. You're a mile from the truck, let's say. It's just getting light. And let's say maybe you've heard some distant bugles. What are you going to throw out there to project? What's your location call? Let me hear. You know, you don't have much going on. You don't really know what's going on. What do you guys do?
If we hear a bugle, we're gonna and we know the direction that bugle's coming from, we're gonna move that direction. I mean, we're fairly aggressive in trying to get in on those bulls, especially Roosevelt's. It seems like you have to be a little bit closer with those bulls to get them fired up. And I don't know if that's just because of all the, the timber over here, that the sound's just not carrying quite as far as it does on the east side or what, but it just seems like you have to be in closer to those bulls to get them fired off. So we'll move in pretty close and then just start out with some cow calls, because, I don't want to blow that bull out if he's close, and I may do that if I get real aggressive right off. And if he responds to my cow calls, I'm just going to stick with the cow calls.
Okay, so let's use that scenario. You're up on a ridge, you heard a bull bugle, let's say about as far off as you can hear a bull bugle. You've closed the distance. He has not sounded off again. What do you do? And I actually want to hear what series are you going to throw out at him?
Okay, I'm going to start off with some just real light cow sounds. And I'm just going to do that and see if he responds. And then we'll wait. Okay. I mean, we're not in a big rush when we're out hunting, and so we'll just wait for a while to see if that bull's going to respond. He may need to think about it for a little bit. And then
okay, so you're going to be patient, and if he doesn't fire back to that, you may sit there a couple more minutes, and then what? You're going to do it again?
Yeah, I mean, we may sit there 5 minutes.
Okay.
And, then we'll do some more cow sounds, and then maybe we'll just, start making some noise in the brush. We'll start, breaking some branches. We'll walk around a little bit. Pretty easy to make noise over here on the west side. There's so much. So we'll make some noise, to try to perk that bull's interest a little bit. After we've done some more cow calls, if we're still not getting a response, then we'll do just kind of a location, kind of a bugle to see if we can get him to sound off.
Let me hear that. Let me hear. So he hasn't fired off. He's there, right, and you're just trying to get him to sound off. Let me hear what you would do.
So I'm not doing anything real aggressive. I'm just trying.
And let's say he hammers you right on that. He hammers right on top of you. Then what?
Then, depends on where the bull's at. And if I think that I can move in on him any closer, I would probably move in on him. And then either do some light cow calls or else just make some noise in the brush to let him know where I'm at. Because I think he's already identified me as an elk. If I make some noise, either cow calls or noise in the brush, that might be enough just to call that bull in.
Okay, and let's say he bugled at you, and he was real intent, and he's facing, and you can tell that he's, coming your direction. Other than, knocking an arrow and getting ready, and let's say he was real intent, you could tell he was coming, but that now he's kind of taking his time. Then what?
I think, we would maybe just wait for a while and continue to make a little bit of noise just to, still sound like that we're some elk over there. I may, constantly, be checking the wind to make sure that we still got, good wind. And then, depends on where my shooter's at. I may kind of circle around a little bit to try to, pull that bull that direction. I may make some additional cow sounds at that point. But if he's not responded to my cow calls, then then I would start to get aggressive with him.
Show me some aggressiveness. Let's say he hammers right back at you and he's closed the distance in half.
In half? So now we're at 40 yards.
Yeah, well, let's say, 40, 50, 60 yards, yeah.
Okay. So Braden's, it depends on, how far that I can see. I like to be able to see my shooter when he's out front. So if Braden's out in front of me, I can only see 50 yards or something. Then I'm going to just have him out 50 yards and then, just continue to try to hammer that bull. If he's hammering me back with a bugle, then I'm just going to stick with that bugle and still be aggressive and try to move around a little bit, continue to make some noise and try to call in Braden's direction.
Okay, so you are using the call in a directional sense. Let's say Braden's out in front of you. The bull is directly between you and Braden, but the wind is coming from your right to left, and the bull's straight over the top of Braden. Which direction are you going to try and call, or where do you want that bull to come in at in relationship to him?
I want that bull to come in above Braden if the wind's blowing downhill.
Right. So you want, and a good lesson to the listeners, you nailed it, is you always want that bull to come in on the upwind side of your shooter.
Yeah, right.
So you're going to use directional calls to try and get him to think that you're 40 or so yards upwind of your shooter, correct?
Right. And with the bull that Braden shot this year, when that bull first came in, he was only about 10 yards from Braden, and then the bull turned to leave. I got up and I just started heading straight away from Braden, bugling as I was walking away, making noise and walking away from Braden to try to make that bull think that I was leaving, so he would turn around and stop.
The old fadeaway.
That's right, fadeaway.
I think the fadeaway at times can be some of the most deadly tactics if you're using a two-man tandem. You get a bull that's coming, he's really moving in on you. If that caller, you tell me what you think, Bryan, but if that caller just starts edging backwards, if he's in a position, the caller's in a position where he is cannot be seen, edge back 40 or 50 yards and let him just slide right by the hunter. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, totally. That's a great way to do it.
And if you can't, would you turn, as a caller, you're going to actually turn away from the bull and call back over your shoulder, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay. Why don't you tell me a little bit of difference between Roosevelt behavior and Rocky Mountain behavior that you've witnessed in Oregon, as far as the bulls and their bugling and aggressiveness and what have you?
Yeah, it just seems like this last hunting season, we hunted on the west side for the first 4 or 5 days, I think, or so, and we had, I think, 4 bulls that responded. 3 of them, I think, bugled twice, and that was it. Even when you moved in on them, it was early in the season. They just didn't get worked up at all. They just weren't aggressive. And then we had one bull that I was up on the top of this ridge on this edge of this clear cut, and I bugled probably, 6 or 8 times, I think. And then finally the bull fired off, a pretty aggressive bugle. So we went straight to the bottom after that bull, and didn't know the area really well. And just with that thick of timber in there, you don't know where all the draws and stuff are. And so we got within where thought we were about, 80 yards, I think, of that bull, and started calling, and I could hear him coming. And then I didn't realize that there was a little, not even really much of a draw between him, between the bull and us, and he just wouldn't come across that draw. But it just seems like you have to get in a lot closer to these bulls over here on the west side to get them to respond, first of all, and then to get them where they're worked up. So
they have a little more they're, I don't know what the word is. They're not less tolerant, but they maybe because of the thicker terrain or something, it just takes a little bit more and it takes a little bit tighter to get them to really crank up on you?
Yeah, and there's so many roads over on the west side over here because there's been so much logging over here. It seems like there's a road everywhere. So it seems like, there's a lot of hunting pressure over here. So I think once those bulls get called to a little bit, they wise up a little bit, and maybe they're not as vocal as they would be otherwise if you're hunting an area. I mean, I've hunted in behind some gates. I guided a couple of times for Eden Ridge Outfitters, specifically Roosevelt's, and he had access to some property that nobody else had access to, and those bulls responded a lot like the ones over east. And so I think that pressure piece of it, plays a huge part in it.
Absolutely. Is there any difference between a Rosie's bugle and a Rocky's bugle as far as, tonal quality? Do they chuckle more? Do they sound virtually the same?
They sound pretty much the same. I mean, they're both, they can be real aggressive or they can just chuckle, or, just like, any of those Rocky Mountain elks. So I haven't noticed a lot of difference in their actual tone of the bugle or how loud they bugle or any of that kind of thing.
So it's not like you could hear a video and say that's a Rosie and that's a Rocky. It's not like that.
No, not necessarily. I mean, when you get in real close to a Rosie, sometimes I've heard that kind of. But I've heard Rocky Mountains do it too. But I've heard a lot more. I think with Roosevelt's, just that kind of Godzilla kind of bugle where they're real aggressive. I mean, you can tell that they're ticked off and they're coming.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, Bryan and Brayden. You chime in. I've always said I'm a lover, not a fighter when it comes to calling elk. I know that there's a lot of guys that, they don't even carry a cow call and they just bugle them up. Would you say that when you're hunting, are you a lover or are you a fighter?
I'm a lover.
What about you, Brayden?
I don't know.
That's kind of a goofy question, I know, but I like to sweet talk them. Our Arizona bulls, it just seems like, I can bugle in smaller, younger bulls, no problem. It just seems like our 8 or 10-year-old bulls, they can usually tell if a guy, obviously I'm not a world champion bugler, but it just seems like they can't really, a good cow calling, they can't tell the difference, bugling, unless you're really, really good. They can usually, after a few bugles, they're kind of on to you. Yeah. Is that the same in your country?
Yeah, that's what I think too. And it seems like, when you're cow calling to a bull too, and he's coming into a cow call, seems like he's a little less weary, maybe. He's not quite on alert because he's not coming in to fight.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. Bryan, tell me a little bit about your, I know you have a I Call Elk app on iTunes.
Yep.
I don't know much about it, but tell me what you got going there.
Okay. So, Braden has been very interested in computer programming, and so has been learning how to program. And so we came up with we wanted to create an app. We have a friend who has an app business. He's a computer programmer, and has kind of been mentoring Braden a little bit. And so we wanted to have a project that Braden could work on, but also that would be of benefit to people. And so we came up with the idea, I Call Elk. And so Braden actually did all of the programming on that to create the actual app. We did a bunch of videos on there on how to call, how to make specific calls, how to tune a diaphragm call, what different calls are. So we list off, diaphragm calls, open reed call, all of those different things. And then we also included the 2012 World Elk Calling Championship video, and then like some frequently asked questions for individuals who want to get into competition calling.
And how do you find that app?
You can find it on the iTunes App Store, and
Do you just type in "I call elk"?
yeah, and we also made a web-based version on our website. So if you have like an Android phone or your computer, you can actually get all the same content on our website.
And what is your website, Braden?
It's umpquoutdoors.com.
Can you spell that for me?
UMPQUAUTDOORS.
Yep.
So you have a website, umpquoutdoors.com, and you have on iTunes, you can type in "I call elk" and it will come up.
Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. And so there's how-tos, and is there actual elk making sounds on the app as well?
No, there's not. It's just us, videos of us, and then
Okay.
some recorded sounds that we make, and then we tell you how to make those specific sounds.
Okay, great. And then, Bryan, do you? I understand you also give lessons on how to call elk, and you'll actually give people lessons.
Yep. Actually, this morning I was up in Hillsboro, giving some private elk calling lessons to about 5 individuals. So that's what.
Awesome.
That's what,
So if people want to contact you about that, do they contact you through your site, or how do you want them to contact you?
through the site would be great.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's it's great talking to you guys about elk. I'm sure we're going to have other conversations because, when it comes to calling elk, there's so many facets, and it's just such a, intriguing thing to me as well as a lot of other people. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and is there any other tips or anything you guys want to add that you don't feel like we've covered today?
We've covered a lot today, Jay, and I think it's a good start for people to gain additional information, and they can always look us up on YouTube too. We have a few videos on there on how to tune the diaphragm call if they don't have the app, and I know that you have a ton of great videos on there. I know, like for the competition calling, your one video with all those different bulls on there bugling was a great way to listen to some real elk.
It's a lot of fun to listen to the real thing for sure. You spoke about Facebook. Is that your personal Facebook? Tell me where I can find you there on Facebook.
So I have a personal Facebook, Braden Langely, and then also we have a Umpqua Outdoors Facebook.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so Umpqua Outdoors has a business page.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And they can contact you through there as well by the messaging system?
Yep, they can.
Okay, fantastic. Guys, I want to close a little bit. I know you both are men of faith, and I just wanted to ask you, as well as I am, what that means to you and how long you guys have been believers, and if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
So, our faith is everything, really. That's really what it's all about. Because this life is short and it passes quickly. Just looking at Braden, and I can't hardly believe that he's 16 years old already. But it's comforting knowing that this life is not all there is, but we can pass on our faith to our kids, and that's really the only thing that we can take with us when we go to heaven is really those that we share the faith with, and so it's good. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Actually got saved probably when I was like a senior in high school. Got actually invited to church by my boss I worked at a gas station convenience store in high school, and he actually asked us to church, and that's really where got introduced to the Lord, and so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, from that point.
It's a testament to someone, it goes back to ask your friends to church, because there's a perfect example of him asking you, and it changed your life.
Yeah, definitely. And, looking back at, a lot of the people that I was friends with in high school who didn't make that same decision, and just seeing the differences in the roads, that God has led us on is pretty amazing. I could very easily have been in that same situation without, the influence of God in my life. Grew up in an alcoholic home, and, prayed for mom and dad, every day, once I got saved. And I mean, God totally did a miracle in their lives. And both of those, my mom and dad both got saved about 4 years later. And so Dad passed away a year and a half ago, and as tragic and as hard as that is to go through the death of a parent, you have a sense of peace because you know that you're going to see him again. So, I mean, it's a solid rock that we stand on, and so it's good.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, there you have it. 2 world champions, father, son, and the dynamic duo. I'm excited to hear Braden call as well as he does, and it's awesome. I'm excited to hear how you guys do this fall, and I'll be looking forward to hearing the reports. And you guys going to get after it pretty hard during the archery season?
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to get after it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, you'll have to keep me up to date. Maybe we can do a little recap, little update right before the season and this summer, and see how things are going. I want to thank you guys both for being on, and I wish you the best with your app on iTunes and with your all the stuff you've got going with your lessons, and just wish you guys well, and God bless you guys.
All right. Thanks, Jay, for having us on your show today. And it's been fun. We love to talk elk and elk hunting. And you're a great example of, what somebody can accomplish. I mean, you've done a lot with your blog and with your website, and I mean, all of the great hunts that you've been on. And I mean, you provide a lot of very detailed, good information on your YouTube videos. So, well done, Jay.
Thank you, and thanks for that. And you guys have a good day, and we'll be talking at you, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, guys, take care.
Wow, what a great show. It's not often that you can have 2 world champion elk callers on at the same time. It was nice to have father and son, Bryan and Brayden Langely, with us, and just 2 great elk callers, state champion, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation champions. Just a whole lot of knowledge there. Obviously very good with their calls, and it was great to talk to them. And I look forward to seeing what they have going on the next couple years. And I'm going to be checking out their elk app that they have. And I just want to thank you guys, our listeners, for tuning in, and thank you for your support. You can send questions or comments about the show to jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can follow along on our adventures at jscottoutdoors.com, on our Facebook page at jscottoutdoors, and on our YouTube channel, which is growing daily with some good videos and content there at jscottoutdoors. Thank you for your support, and if you like what you're hearing, we appreciate 5-star ratings on iTunes and positive feedback, and we just want to thank you guys for listening, and until next time, God bless. Thanks for listening to the J. Scott Outdoors Western Big Game Hunting and Fishing Podcast, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today.